Because you didn't have to do it? You didn't have to do it, Peter? Okay, thank you.
Testing. Is this on? Yeah, great.
Hello.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming out on a soon-to-be very rainy night. I'm Rabbi Steve Cohen, and it's really an honor for me to be up here with Jana Brody. And this is not my usual mode of presentation, so and not Jana's either. So, but we know that you will all forgive us for any awkwardness in our presentation tonight. But I want to just offer a couple of introductory comments about Jana's book before getting into a dialogue with her. As you know, the book is called Sit Behind the Nets. And you know, I was interested in this book just because I've known Jana for almost 40 years. We first met when she was an undergraduate at UCSB, and I was the Hillel rabbi. I was a brand new rabbi, and I met Jana and her friends. And so our friendship goes back a long, long, long way. And so my interest in the book, in Jana, her family, is rooted in that long friendship, but I didn't know what to expect when I started reading her book. And what I want to say is that this book, one of the ways in which this book surprised me was that, hi everybody, come on in. I was caught by surprise by the many different levels of this book. There are some very profound themes that are at play in Jana's book. First of all, it's a book about love, and the love between a mother and a daughter, but also between Jana and the rest of her family. And in a very, very open and honest and beautiful way, Jana really shares the love in their family in a way that I found very, very moving. It's also, of course, you know, not surprisingly, but I didn't fully expect it. It's about the experience of loss and grief. And I think one of the moments that touched me the most was when you were talking about is it the woman who has a radio program or a podcast, or you know, Daughters Without Mothers, and the way that you learned from her about grief, and so I discovered that this book, on one very important level, is Jana's working through of her own grief, and I came to realize, you know, how wonderful that Jana found a way of responding to her own grief, which is for some people is something that they never really quite come to grips with. It's also very, very much, and Jana talks about this I think in a number of different ways in the book. It's a book about silence and about speaking. The silence part being, well, among other things, the disappointment, you know, the hope for and the disappointment at the lack of communication from the Dodgers, from people who should have. It wouldn't have been hard for them to just say something, but there was silence there, and kind of in contrast to that is Jana finding her voice. So this theme of silence and speech and communication and both the importance of communication when faced with a profound loss, and the difficulty of communication, I think, is a really interesting theme through this whole book. There's also a very basic Jewish principle that I think is that Jana is exploring in this book, which is it's expressed in the Hebrew words pikuach nefesh, which might be translated as the infinite value of a human life. Any single human life, the infinite value of it. And how in Judaism we do anything, to save a single life. And that kept coming up for me as you were talking about the whole question that is really the dominant theme of the second half of the book, which is what is reasonable to expect from Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, spring training. There are lots of people, and we hear about them in Jana's book, who feel like, the odds of this happening are so small that we shouldn't need to adjust our experience of baseball, just to try to prevent the very random kind of event that this is. But I think in your voice, Jana, that comes out just so, with such profound love and grief. It sort of brings the reader back to realize that every single life is infinitely valuable. And so, yes, it is worth making some real changes. And then there are many, many themes, but the other thing that, and maybe Judah, you'll have something to say about this also, but the theme of baseball and your family, and what an important part of your family's life baseball has been, is, how it was sort of a basic requirement when you got married, that you embrace baseball, or and yet this tragedy happened within the context of a baseball game. And so the complicated dance that you and your family do with baseball in the aftermath of this tragedy, I think is a very fascinating and sort of, it becomes a profound topic. So for me, those were a few of the things that were going through my mind as I was reading. There are many, many other things. But what I've suggested to Jen is that we could divide this presentation into 4 parts. First, to hear from Jana, and she'll read a little bit, but also talk a little bit, and just about who Linda was. Just so that we really get, at least a little bit of a sense of who Erwin's wife was. Part 2, maybe to talk a bit about this horrible moment. Both what happened at the stadium, Lori calling Jana, the sort of intense pain of the moment of her being hit by the ball, and then the few days after of seeing what is going to happen. Maybe as a third section, kind of hearing a little bit about the period of the grief And then part 4 really talking about your campaign. And I know it's not just been yours, but other people here also, to try to make a change in the world, to try to make a change in policy regarding these safety nets, and to hear a little bit about this campaign that you've been waging with some very significant success. So that's the way I was thinking of structuring this, and it's now almost 20 past 7. And, I think maybe we'll go for at most an hour. Okay, does that sound right? And, it might be shorter if we want, or so. So Jana, can you start us off by, and we picked a page or two that you could read that would sort of start us remembering your mom.
Of course.
And any other introductory comments you want to make would be fine.
Well, I just am so thankful to be here, and I want to thank Paul and Rabbi because this was never on my radar. And, again, this Harvard-educated rabbi's friend of my life gave me this is a pretty good book. I'm like, oh, thank God.
I loved this book.
Because they, said yes, sight unseen, and I didn't know how anyone was going to react. Nobody in the 2 years I wrote it asked me once to read one line of it. It was kind of weird, I thought, in my family. And I kept bringing it up, and then they, I'm at 20,000 pages. I need 50. And then, 6 months later, guess what? I got the 30,000, but no one took me seriously or whatever. And I'm not a writer, per se. I'm a painter, and, but I have always been a journal writer. And I think that's the way it came out. It's my voice, it's me, everyone who does know me said, oh, I could hear you talking. And then the people that didn't know me was like, oh, that reminded me of my mom, or, I could hear my mom talking, or, thanks for sharing. anyways, thank you, because thank you guys for even coming. This is so crazy. And I'm touched. There's people like it, that I can touch people. And again, it was very therapeutic, and I talk about how it came to be. Someone said you should do it, and I'm like, okay. It was my COVID project, but I finished it and I did it. And so anyway, I'm very excited.
Congratulations! It's such a huge accomplishment. Really.
Yeah. And again, I did have a lot of help, and I did have a lot of mentors. And there's even, my dad's reached out to people, and there's this, Bill Plaskey of the LA Times is going to write on it, and just cool stuff. So my goal was, even if you don't read the book and you read the title, that's the message. So I call it a memoir with a message. One of my mentors said, the title's not so great. I'm like, I'm not changing it. It's, I had to stand up for myself, and I said, even if, like I said, they don't read the book, sit behind the nets. Again, that's just go to the game, support your team, but sit behind the nets.
Yeah, for those of you that haven't read the book yet, and in terms of the message of this book, one of the things that I learned that was, and maybe we'll get to it a little bit more later on in the conversation, but one of the things that I had no idea of is that the players insist that their families sit behind the nets because the players understand the danger. That was kind of a revelation to me. And then the number of injuries every year, was it 1,750, in 1 year, the number of injuries. And these are life-changing injuries. So it's a real issue. And I had no idea before reading the book. I thought, what happened to your mom was, 1 in a million and, never happen again.
1 in 40,000.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but let's sort of, so I just wanted to emphasize that message of this book comes through very strongly. But maybe before we do all of that, let's just hear a little bit more about your mom. And, who was it that you lost?
Thank you. I appreciate it. So this chapter is called A Loyal Fan. I try not to be too schmaltzy with that, but I I wanted to keep the baseball theme going. So, this memoir is intended to honor Linda Faye Levy Goldblum. I have described her inner spirit and how people were drawn to her kind and open heart. I feel I need now to address her outer appearance. She was a beautiful, petite framed woman with soft blue eyes and short salt and pepper hair that she took pride in never dyeing. Linda preferred male barbers over, in her words, foo-foo hairdressers. She kept her stick-straight hair fashionably spiky and managed with mousse or gel, and she always did her own hair washing and blow drying. She loved to indulge in professional manis and pedis on a regular basis, unlike me, who only goes to a nail salon for special occasions. Most mothers warn their daughters not to leave the house in mismatched socks or granny panties. The truth is, if you get in an accident, medics strip away your clothes to treat your injuries. Mom must have known it was more important to have properly groomed and colorful toenails. The family, and especially the girls, will always cherish the sight of her beautifully manicured bubblegum pink toenail sticking out from under the sheets of her deathbed.
Thank you. One of the moments early on in the story that you tell about are her pan friends, the group of women that she would play pan with, and you and I didn't look for the passage beforehand, but can you just say a little, not even reading, but just share a little bit about that group of women, and also, and if anybody here has any light to shed on this, one of the themes that comes up is, certain things that used to be important that were dying out. And the game of Pan, which I've heard of, but it's apparently dying out. And what does that mean? So, anyway, who are those women? And they had a long association.
Yeah, I think of those women were our neighbors. They were our, temple friends. They were, right? They were just people that surrounded us. Literally, Maxine, who I mentioned, was our across-the-street neighbor. And they were just part of our life. I mean, they rotated through the houses, and they would be in my family room, and they had that, I don't know how many funny-shaped table, and they had 9 decks, and they were mucking and plucking, and chips were flying, and it was very funny to me, thinking back. And, I mentioned our book club and our group, that ours is all about everything but the book, and it's about the camaraderie and drinking and having wine, and so then that's when I reached out to my girlfriend, my neighbor, and she happens to share my birthday. I mean, I felt fondly of this woman. She's still alive. And I just couldn't remember all the details. And I'm like, did you guys drink at these pan parties? Oh, no, we were serious gamblers. It was 5 cents a nickel or whatever it was. No way, we were very serious. And it was just funny, but I do remember, being down the hallway and listening to their cackling, and there was always catered, beautiful desserts and things, and it was these people were throughout her life, even till the very end. She wouldn't miss her weekly pan game, and she wasn't driving, it's in her late 70s anymore, and they would pick her up, or my dad would arrange to drive, and it was a staple in her life and all of our lives. And again, these women, I've known for all these years. And again, it was, they were all at the funeral, and it was really beautiful. And, I always, my mom used to say, how are you doing? Towards, I'm fair. She was feeling slow, and she was feeling like, I can't even drive to my own games anymore. And it was interesting to ask the women how they felt about that. And they're like, she was never a burden. She always added to the game. She always was, important for her to be there. So it's community. Yeah. It's community.
So there's also this, I guess it was really, after she died, there was this process of going through all of the stuff, the furs and the jewelry and the perfume bottles, and I'm curious, what you would say about Jana, what you would say, and you, I think you write beautifully, so beautifully about it, in a way that makes me, first of all, remember my own mother, and how much I loved it when she would dress up and put on her fur and perfume, and but I don't know if you want to read one, a little bit from that section, or the other thing that well, many things stuck out, but another thing that stuck out was just the way that she was a great storyteller. And there was some situation where was she in court, or where there was where she sort of told a story about.
Yeah, she was in court, per se, And again, I'm looking at my dad because these are all my memories, but I don't know if they're all real. There's stories that I've heard, and I put a little disclaimer in the beginning because it's just the stories I've heard, or that kind of thing. But my mom was she had the gift of listening and talking. I mean, she really could do both. And most people would say she was a talker, but it's not true. She was there to listen to so many people and so many different walks of life, and she did have that, both sides. But yeah, she was a storyteller. And which part were you remembering? I get lost in my. Yeah, she.
You know what? I want to actually go on to the night of the game, and I know that. So it was Linda and Erwin, and they were with. Were they with? It was your dad's brother and wife, and so it was just a very powerful line drive foul ball. Hit her in the temple, bounced, and then it somehow went and struck your brother also, right? Sitting behind you. And that somebody said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm not okay." You said, "Are you okay?" And then for you, Jana, you were saying you were at
I was at Rena's bat mitzvah. Rena Glassman's
bat mitzvah.
It was
but
my.
later on that
Oh, yeah, it
evening,
was
Lori called
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Do you want to read just a little bit from that section of the book? And I think it's page 32.
Yeah. Let's see. I was caught off guard and in disbelief as I stared at my glowing cell phone. I didn't talk to my sister on a regular basis, so I immediately knew something was wrong when I saw her number on my phone so late at night. She went on to say that she didn't have all the details regarding the brain surgery, and since I was 2 hours away, I shouldn't panic or rush to go now in the middle of the night, as Mom was stable in ICU. I believed her and lay awake staring at the ceiling. I don't think I got much sleep because I woke with a raging migraine. Headaches are a rare occurrence for me, and I felt nauseous and sick and laid in bed extremely still for most of the morning, waiting for a call or some news on how to move or react. Oddly enough, my mom often had migraines, and I couldn't help but think I was channeling her pain. And then I reached out and no one called me. So I called my Aunt Eve. I called someone a little further away from my immediate family, but she was there. So I was like, is this real? Is this really happening? What's going on? So it was strange. And one of the themes that you didn't pick on that I feel is just, there was just so many miraculous things in this book. It was B'Sharet, it meant to be, it was spooky, even that migraine thing, things like that kept happening. And the fact that my uncle and my aunt was at the game, That was their one game all year. Usually my dad goes with their best friends on a regular basis. And the guys said, take my tickets. My wife's not feeling well. My dad's brother was there to be with them in brain surgery at midnight. Like, it's crazy. Like, stuff like that kept happening throughout the book. That's part of the reason I wanted to write it down, because I thought it was spooky, or meant to be, or Lori would say, the ghosts, But anyway, it was pretty crazy.
So one of the most both disturbing but interesting and touching moments is when you describe going in to see your mom with your father, and seeing both her head shaven and sort of the ugliness of that, but then also the her perfectly manicured or pedicured toenails, and just that and you talk about how in the middle of all of the emotions that you're feeling, there's also that your color sense is sort of struck, and you remember the pink and the black and the purple. I don't remember but I don't know. Do you want to read some of that? It's pretty. I know it's intense and hard, but is that maybe on 34 and 35 or?
Okay, yeah, you're right. So as I stepped in her sterile room, holding my dad's hand tightly, I was struck by color. Having the eyes of an artist, I noticed this strange range of colors. Black, pink, and blue attacked my brain. Upon seeing my mom lying, buried in sheets, surrounded by beeping machines and tubes, immediately my eyes searched for her soft blue eyes. As her eyes were closed, my vision shifted higher. I found myself staring at black. The right side of her head had been shorn asymmetrically. Half of her short, spiky salt and pepper hair was gone. The shaven half of her head exposed an enormous scar over her ear up to the top of her skull. Huge black, thick stitches stuck out like ugly spider legs. The dark webbing that held her skin together was the closing effects of the emergency brain surgery the midnight before. My shocked and numb brain started to work. Why was this heinous view uncovered? Why do we have to see these numerous stitches, scars, and awful hairdo? Why did bad things happen to good people? The next jarring thing I noticed was not the many colorful tubes sticking out of her nose, throat, and arms. The thing that stuck me more literally was sticking out of the blanket at the base of her bed, perpendicular to the mattress, a set of perfectly pedicured and beautifully painted pink toenails. Why were her tiny feet uncovered? I was equally perplexed at her toes as I was at her head, adding to my shock and my confusion as to why those opposing body parts were left uncovered. I saw my mother's current state as a body portrait. Her 5-foot frame lay in contrast of beauty and gore. She looked calm and animated as her chest rose and fell methodically. Her breathing was done for her through the blue hosed machine. It was weird.
Thank you. Yeah, and
it was awful. Like,
I think
why was her feet sticking out? Like, it was weird.
This is one of the things that's remarkable about your book, Jana, is that it's just honest, and about everything that's going on inside of you and all of the different levels. Your heartbreak, and your artist eyes, working at the same time, and just how that's all happening inside of you at the same time. It's a very it's powerful reading. So then, of course, there was the very, very difficult decision, but it was a decision that eventually was clearly the right thing, which was to not not do a second surgery and basically allow your mom to die, which that was happening anyway. But then there was this very, this comes up anytime that a death requires by law an autopsy, is that the family is caught in this horrible situation of wanting and needing a funeral as soon as possible, but having to wait while the coroner is involved and no idea of how long it's going to take. And so we didn't look for the passage there, but I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. But it is something that you write about quite effectively. And I don't know if that's something that we can ever get changed. But you're not the only family that I've worked with that have been in that kind of situation of what do? We need to grieve. We need ritual. We need community. But we can't have a burial because the coroner hasn't done their work yet.
Do you remember me calling you?
Yeah, I do.
He Robbie's in this book. I was like, what do you do? And you're like, American law takes precedence over Jewish law. Like, we're stuck. I called it funeral limbo.
Yeah.
So that was very strange. We have these rituals for a reason, to start and finish, but we couldn't even start. And so what do? Do we go back to work? Do his kids go back to school? We just pretend like we just wait? It was very mysterious.
Yeah.
And it's somebody who's not Jewish read it and said, I thought you were talking about a month and you're only talking about 10 days. But to me, it was forever.
Yeah,
because usually Judaism you bury right away, And that was very weird to me that it was, because it was blunt head injury, she was required by law to go to a coroner. So that was, strange.
Yeah.
But yeah. That was, and then it was high holidays were coming, it was, all these things were in the way. And then we didn't even get to grieve for, Shiva the whole time. The holidays interrupted it. So it was very disruptive kind of time.
But then, in contrast to the, what I would call the brokenness of that grieving, frustrated inability to grieve was this very powerful moment in Japan a year later on her yahrzeit, where you were with your friends in Japan in this little memorial shrine that they had in their home, right? Can you set that up for us a little bit and then read a bit from the book about that? Because it was awesome.
Yeah, it was another miraculous thing that was unplanned, but Riva was abroad in London, and she would plan to go to Japan to see our family friends of years and years, and I'm like, I'm going. It had been 30 years. I went when I was 19, and I'm like, I need to go back, and family friends that I describe in the book. But what I didn't know, is how they saw my mom, or what imprint my mom left on that side of the world. I only knew them on this side of the world, kind of thing. So, it was interesting timing. So let's see. So walking into the home of Yasuaki's mother, Hiroko Morikawa, that summer.
And I'm sorry to interrupt,
sure.
but just remind me and everybody how you knew this. How did your families know each other?
Yeah, that was my dad's doing. So my dad was a wrestling coach at Pierce College, and we had exchanges. So for years, the coach would always come to our house because my dad was the coach, and so we had repetition. We didn't just get a student here, a student there. We always had the coach. So it was somebody we grew up knowing, and then when his kids were old enough, his kids started to come. And then my sister went for her honeymoon. And then it was, when I was 19, it was my turn to go. And then when it was Reva's 19, it was her turn to go. And then their daughter came and stayed with us in Santa Barbara for a month. So when she was 19. So it was like just this ongoing relationship was beautiful, and we always kept in contact, and they're, beautiful family. And they happened to speak English because they were, the son of my dad's dear friend and coach was an English teacher. So that made it very easy to keep in touch.
Is that Yasuaki?
Yasuaki.
Uh-huh.
So Yasuaki is the son.
And he wrote this incredible, beautiful letter, which maybe you can read that letter also.
Sure,
so read about your experience in their home on your mom's first yard site, and also the letter that he wrote.
Yes, that was our first year. So walking into the home of Yasuaki's mother, Hiroko Morikawa, that summer on August 29th, I stopped dead in my tracks. On the mantle, a two-foot statue of two wrestlers entangled mid-hold was prominently displayed opposite the threshold. An exact duplicate of that same sculpture, hand-painted by my mother, rested at the foot of the fireplace of my family's home. Seeing that specific art piece proudly displayed in this overseas home gave me a mixed feeling of a ghostly chill and a warm hug. Closing my eyes, I could see Mom once again painting the highlights over that black base with gold on her dry brush. Upstairs, we went to see the room I had stayed in 30 years earlier. It was now overflowing with clothes and had a memorial shrine of her late husband, my dad's dear flat-topped friend who had since passed away. Smiling at all the clothes, I felt my mom near, as she too was a clothes horse with extra rooms to hold her goods. Before my goosebumps could subside, Mrs. Morikawa pulled out an outfit that my mom had gifted her on her last trip there. It was covered in playful brown and black animal print. Dad confirmed that she purposely left it out of her suitcase upon packing as another unique gift made in the USA. The most chilling moment came when Hiroko urged me to kneel in front of the memorial shrine that's set up in the corner of the room. She instructed me to ring the gong and say, "Hello, Mom." Riva soaked it all in with me and then quietly reminded me that today was August 29th. It was the exact day of the first anniversary of my mom's death. With tears in her eyes, she rang the gong as well and said, "Hello, Bubby." Who knew that Riva and I would be celebrating Mom's first year sight in this amazing, foreign, yet touching way? The vibration and tone of the gong will stay with me forever. Couldn't have planned that. And that we were there for 2 whole weeks. And the one day we went to visit, this woman was that day. We didn't plan it. And seeing that
Fantastic,
sculpture, that was
of the wrestlers.
How
and
did
it was
they-
the
and
same sculpture that you had in your home. Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
and I asked my dad, how did it get there? It was a heavy thing. Did they carry it? Did they ship it? How did they? It was a honking piece of plaster.
No. Okay. Let's talk about the nets. And I guess I'd like to ask you to start on page 145. This again, a very affecting moment in this book where you talk about a player who, it's a different situation, different story, but a player who, Albert Almora, who has just hit a foul ball that has hit a 2-year-old girl.
Yeah, and that was a more memorable day too. So on my 53rd birthday, a ball caused a professional player, a mother and a father to scream out, loud along with me. On May 29th, 2019, we watched the Chicago Cubs player Albert Almora Jr. cry out on camera and physically drop to his knees in an emotional gut reaction to watching his foul ball hit a 2-year-old girl in the head. With his own eyes, he saw the trauma unfold. He later told reporters that probably what sucked the most, as soon as I hit it, the first person I locked on was her. Almora later remarked, I am at a loss for words. As the father of 2 young boys, I want to put a net around the whole stadium. It puts life in perspective. The camera stayed on Almora long enough to be comforted by his teammates and coaches. Yeah, he couldn't even go on, you know.
Yeah.
He was one of many.
Yeah. You know, I'll just read from my notes about, you know, from the book, you know, things that you know, I had never even thought about. You know, first and third base coaches now all wear helmets to protect them from being struck and injured or killed. And you quote the coach of the Rockies, who says, I know my wife and kids are happier that I have it on. There is no doubt it's very dangerous out there. And this Rich Hill, Dodger pitcher, saying it's something that you just hold your breath for a second. You just hope it hits a seat and not a person. So, you know, there's this whole level of terror, really, so your campaign, and it's not just you, there's also this guy, is it Jordan Scope? Is he the sort of
One of the guys.
funny guy that?
Yeah.
And do you want to tell just a little bit about the sort of the movement that's out there that you and your family, you know, have been now part of?
Yeah, it was pretty strange. You know, people start coming out of the woodwork, you know, after the interviews and the media exposure. And I joined the Injured Players Minor League and Baseball League secret Facebook group with like 65 people that vent and share and cry. And, you know, that's crazy. And Jordan Scott reached out to us, and he's more of a brass kind of, you know, angry. He was more angry, and he only witnessed a person getting hit like in a parking lot, like a ball, you know, a ball came over, but he had a different perspective. You know, he thought it was all about a cover up, and, you know, which opened me and my dad's eyes, because in the beginning we just thought it was a fluke thing and this stuff is happening, but we didn't realize how long it was happening and how often it was happening. And he has a whole website called Foul Ball Safety Now, and he took a different perspective. He was blaming journalists for not sharing the stories and thinking that they were tied up with, you know, the ball players and the ball clubs, and that, you know, LA Times, and there's like an unwritten rule or, you know, something. He totally believes this. So I don't know if it's true, because my reporter, the ESPN guy, was in New York, so it was a little further away, and he was very gracious and very helpful, you know, but the local people were not so, you know. But he had a, like I said, a brasher way, but he was always campaigning, and he would have Zoom calls with us and people, and just always trying to get the word out his way, you know. And so he always, you know, called my dad and he joined my group and come on this call and share your story. And he was in touch with a lot of people that had been injured, that, you know, personally. So he would get them on the calls, and it was just very interesting. But it wasn't only him. There was another guy, Andy Zalotnick, who was an injured player, injured fan. But he worked the political way. He went to like a congressman and said, your constituents are getting hurt at these games. And it worked. Like, he got, you know, this guy to write some legislation and make some things, because it's, you know, it goes back to almost like, you know, I talk a little bit about, you know, safety belts. You know, in the beginning, people thought it was hokey and it was uncomfortable, and
I remember that. We
You
didn't
do.
have seatbelts when I
Yeah.
was growing up, when I was little.
Yeah, and things like that. And then again, Jordan Scott compared it to big tobacco, how they knew in the 50s that it caused cancer, but they sold it anyway. And they sold it to, they pushed it as a relaxing thing. And that was a cover up too. So I talk about Alan Fish, a 14-year-old boy who died at Dodger Stadium, 40 years before my mom. And that story, nobody knows that story. That got covered up too. So again, Jordan's was more about conspiracy and cover up and all that. And, he was helpful.
Jen, I want to I do want to, in a minute, invite people to ask questions or add comments, for family members. One of the things that I don't remember where in the book it is, but I think it's toward the end where you talk about questions that come up that people ask you often, including, how do you feel about baseball now? And I do remember that that you say, well, it helped that our family has this St. Louis Cardinals focus, and so you could be done with the Dodgers and still have a team that you were cheering for. But can you just say a little bit about your family and baseball in the aftermath of this terrible, terrible tragedy?
Well, in the very beginning, it was September. She died in September, and they were on a pennant race. And then Dodgers won, and then they had to go to the World Series. So it's like everywhere you looked was Dodgers. The news, the radio, people's shirts, the flags hanging out the window, and it was like, come on already. These guys are jerks. They wouldn't even acknowledge my mom's death. I was like, angry. And they're making buku bucks, and all these people I know who are injured get zero money. I'm like, I hate this. This big $1 billion organization was hard to watch them. And they did lose. They lost the World Series, so that was good. But not, I was talking to Dude about it. Not that, that spring, the next season, they wanted, the Cardinals were in Oakland. They wanted to go to 2 games, right? And Al was here with me, and I'm like, I don't think I can go. I don't even want to go. But then I have my son. I'm like, gotta make memories. I can't, and it was. So I did go. I talked about I made a shirt that said #Raise the Net. So I had my little protest shirt, and they bribed me, taking me to an art. We went to the Paso Robles art exhibit, light show on the way. So it was a tit for tat kind of thing. And but I have to say, I talked about it in there. It was PTSD because I told Annie, buy the tickets behind the net or I'm not going. And so you can do that now. And that's what that's my pitch. Yeah. Look on the chart and just sit behind the net. But we sat really in the, right behind the nets. So the the balls were coming over. And bong, 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 all these, foul balls, and it was a little stressful. But
yeah. So just before we go to questions, in terms of how things have moved since your mom's death, in all major league stadiums now, the nets have been significantly extended. Is that true?
I don't know if they all have officially done it, but they have all said they're to do it. It's been mandated. They have done it. So I think that's done because it's been, and the Dodgers weren't one of the first. There was plenty of other people that did it much quicker and much faster. But I am thankful that the Dodgers not only extended it, but they did raise it. Because my mom, it affected the raising. So they did do that.
And I know near the end of the book, you talk about even the minor leagues.
Yeah, just 2 months or 3 months ago, I got a call from Andy Zlotnick, or he posted on the Facebook group. Guess what? They just announced a mandate for minor league stadiums but they said they have to get it done by 2025. So it's 2 more seasons of injuries. You know, like, I don't know why they're slow, why they're waiting. And then spring training, I was trying to get it out by now. Spring training is the smallest stadiums, the same exact players, and there's not that many nets either. So Judah's in Arizona. I'm like, go check them out. Go check out the stadiums. And there are nets, you know, but I don't know if there's enough. Like there's some places like, or minor, you know, Peoria is famous for there's no nets, and you know, and a lot of the people in my Facebook group got injured at minor league parks or at spring training parks. So anyway, it's ongoing, but again, that's kind of the neat thing of the book. It just kind of unfolded as I was writing it, you know. Yeah. But I'm very, you know, happy that change is made. And again, you know, it's fluky, but
it seems as though your voice was part of getting that change to happen, which is right.
I don't know about that. Well, it takes
that's got to feel, you know, that's significant, Jana.
I don't know.
Let's say it did.
I say it takes a village. Thank you. But I think it takes a village, and I think that I made a stink. You know, ESPN. You know, I got the attention of the news, and so then the cameras were catching the Alberto Mera stuff. I mean, if you were at the game, you could catch it, but usually if you're watching on TV, the camera goes away, and I'm almost sure they're told, don't put that on TV, you know. But because it was in people's, you know, it was in the news, there's so many articles written, you know, both pro and con, and I talk about that, the hecklers and the naysayers and all that, but
even Stephen King.
Yeah,
right?
Stephen King.
The famous writer, he basically said, you know, no, it would detract from the experience of being at a baseball game.
Yeah. So, you know, I think I got the ball rolling. And again, because it was a death, people referred to it in every article. So every time there was an injury, they would say, this is serious, but guess what happened to Linda in August, you know, of 2018. So she was in every, you know, they kept bringing that up, like, you know, these children are getting hit, but somebody died. So, you know, so that she, you know, again, the whole other theme you talked about, she's just you know, not an insignificant person, like you said, an infinite person, but like an average mom, he had an extraordinary death, you know, so I think that's pretty cool. You know, like she didn't die in vain. Something changed, you know, she made her mark.
Okay, so does anybody, you know, personally, I would love to hear anything from anybody else in the family that has anything to, you know, to add, or does anybody have any questions or comments? And if you do, I know there aren't that many of us here, but please use the microphone so that our Zoom, what do we call it? So our Zoom audience can hear. Does anybody have anything that they would like to ask or to add?
Jana.
And I know that who here has actually had a chance to read the book at this point? So just a few of us. But you know, really, it's an easy and very rewarding read, really. Anybody have it can be Janice? Please. Well, just it's for the Zoom. Here.
Thank you. Jana, I spoke with you at the time, you know, that you lost your mom, but I can just imagine how painful and difficult this is to relive it. So I thank you for doing that, and my heart goes out to you again with condolences. It's really tragic. But I was just curious because you said you're a writer. And so I was just curious if you were writing along the way, and that's how you were able to capture these beautiful details so vividly later, or whether it was all, you know, you made yourself sit down and relive it many months later? Or
That's a
it's
great
just,
question, Janice.
I'm just curious.
I had the same question.
Yeah, no, I was a journal writer until I got married. I got married. So I haven't really written journals for 27 years. I stopped because we have Facebook, we have, it's different. Facebook was kind of like my journal, So no, I didn't write it along the way.
So all of these, everything that you remembered, all of the details were just, they were in there and you just had to pull them out.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Other questions or?
Oh yeah.
Oh, very.
It was very cathartic, but it wasn't really. I didn't set out to be a healing book. It was a more, angry at the Dodgers book. That's, I had to get you to feel sympathy for my mom and to get to know her before you could even, get to the second half.
Right.
I'm not a documentarian, so I didn't just chronicle the news. I wanted you to, the first half, I said, get to know my mom, and then.
Right. And you do say early on, this book is a tribute to my
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
And it is that, as well as, a protest, a cry for change. Yes, Laura.
I haven't had the privilege to read it yet, but I look forward to it. But what I feel, just knowing you and knowing your family, et cetera, I feel like you wrote the book how you would want someone to document you. And I don't know, do you agree with that?
That's weird. Wait. So,
Do you want to say a little
yeah.
bit more what you mean by that, Laura?
Yeah,
Because it's an interesting comment or question.
Well, I guess, when I listened to how you wanted to introduce the reader to your mom, just like we would all want to be introduced to somebody who's reading our story before they read about our demise. And I think you did it in such a beautiful, heartfelt way, but I think it's kind of how we all would like to be remembered. Or I haven't read it, but I'm saying you don't start out with just angry Jana at the Dodgers, right? Because again, you want it's about you and your family and your mother's memory and trying to make a change through your mother's legacy. So I guess what stood out the most to me is before I had even come to this and when you had talked about the book, I thought it's a beautiful way to pay tribute to somebody and get a message. And knowing you and the kind of person you are, that if you were going to write someone was going to write something about you, you'd want a full introduction to your whole person, because that's who you are, and then tell the story of your demise. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Is that correct?
I think so. I think the piece about using my voice is the piece. I don't know, maybe being the third child, maybe I didn't always have a voice, or having a strong husband, I don't always have a voice, so I think it was my way of, using my voice, and getting, I know I have a strong voice, so it came out this way. And it was interesting to me because my brother and sister lived way closer to LA and to the reporters and but they all came to me, and it was because I started it, and they're like, we're fine. You keep talking to him. They didn't have any, it was interesting that I went with it, and that was a lot of part of it. So using my voice, and I put my maiden name on there, part of who I am.
Right. And it's nice that at some point in the book, Eric, your husband, says, one of the positives that comes out of this whole story is that Jana finds her voice. And that was a touching thing for me to read. Yeah. Okay, Judah.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, and then
You got chunked.
Sorry. Oh, all right. Well, Judah, hold on to your thing.
Brother-in-law,
And-
Trump's son.
And you are?
No, I'm Steve, the outlaw brother-in-law,
The outlaw.
if you will, as I'm referenced in the book. There were a lot of angles to take when you wrote the book. A lot of avenues you could have gone down, and I understand the concept of the book was, I guess, for your healing and to write your memory of the events and the things that happened. And now that you have found your voice, is there anything that you wish you hadn't put in there? And anything you wish you would have put in there? And along those lines, is there a follow-up book? No, let me finish. Like, to talk to those vendors at the stadium and do a more in-depth with your voice and push this, because you're right, as a reader, you will take from this that you found your voice and that you didn't wave the flag the highest, Zabrotnik or whatever it is. You know, those guys are out there spending thousands and thousands of dollars. And that's a great story that everybody needs to hear. But you keep it, you're like the fly that won't leave the horse alone. And that's so much more important. You just keep it out there. So for that purpose alone and your therapy, have you given any thought to anything that you may have omitted and writing a second follow-up book?
Nice to the Dodgers.
I feel I did. I published that letter that we wrote that got returned twice. I mean, I'm hoping someone will read it and say, hey, why, I'm hoping subtly the story will continue, But I don't know. I think I'm done. It was a lot of work, and it was emotional. And even the rewriting, and there's still mistakes. Like, I can't even look at it one more time. Like, Rabbi's like, read this. I'm like, oh, I haven't read it. Like, you get to a point where it's put to bed. I couldn't really, Anyway, I'm glad it's done. And I did have to add a little bit to the end, because things changed and stuff. But I'm not a perfectionist, and rereading it and rewriting it and fixing it, that was hard, But I don't know. I think I might have another story in me, but I don't think it's this one.
Thank you. Judah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on two things. One, my mom talked a little bit about the surrealness of when it first happened and she got the call. And I just remember for me, it was like this cannot be happening. So I kind of just almost ignored it for the next couple days, because I knew if I thought about it, it would be all I could think about. So my mom left, went to LA the next day. Then I think that same day or the next day, my dad left. So it's just me and my sisters. And then I just remember I was at marching band practice, and I got a call from my older sister, and she's like, we got to go now. And I just remember that was when it hit, and I realized this is really happening. So we took the train to LA, and everything happened from there. And then just the other thing I wanted to touch on was the weirdness of obviously being a baseball fan and watching baseball and then having this happen. But more than that,
I think most of you know Judah, but
yeah,
not just a baseball fan.
for those of you at my bar mitzvah, my dad rambled about the St. Louis Cardinals for half an hour. Apologies. But so yeah, it was. But more than that, I'm a sports journalist now still, and I just remember it having an impact on me 3 or 4 years later when I was in college. I was at a college baseball game, so it's pretty comparable to the the spring training parks, and they had some nets, but they stopped at the edge, and I had my camera, so I went over to the spot where the net wasn't, because I was well, let's see if I can just do this because, you know, I could shoot behind the net, but I was like, might as well see what I can get of the outfielders. So I was over there, and then, you know, there's a pop fly, and it wasn't even like a direct shot, but I still just remember, like, my like stomach dropped, and I like put my camera down, and I was like freaking out, like looking, where is this ball coming? Like, I didn't know if it was going to land in the outfield. I didn't know if it was going to land in the stands. And I just remember like that whole rest of that game. I stayed for the rest of the game, but I just remember like feeling so anxious, and like there was a pit in my stomach. And I think I even told like 2 of the fans who were near me, I was like, hey, like, yeah, like this happened to my bubby, blah, blah, blah. Just because like I felt like I had to get it off my chest kind of. But yeah, I mean, it was just like, I just remember feeling that, and it was weird because like I hadn't thought about it in so long, and then all of a sudden you just hear the crack of the bat, and it feels like it was yesterday.
Thank you so much, Judah. Yeah, I was thinking about you a lot, you know, as I was reading the book, just thinking, you know, here's the grandson, you know, whose life is so much about sports. Francis, did you have Jenna, did you want to say anything in response to Judah? Or?
Yeah, he recently shared that story with me, and that's part of it. Like, I'm so thankful that we're just here to have him share that. Like, no one really shared much. You know, like I had questions even in the book. I'm like, I wonder how they, felt. And again, one of the things that's important to me, there's a lot of people in this room who are mentioned in this book because it's a community. Everyone was there for me. And Scott Ernstein drove them to the train to get down there. It's like, because Reva didn't have a car, it's like everybody in this community was very supportive and thankful. But again, I appreciate him sharing that because I didn't know at the time, and I still don't,
Yeah. So it's 8:15. I do want to wrap up in just a minute, but does anybody, Francis, did you want to say? I think we have time. We have time for a short comment. And Tova, did you have a short thing? Great. All right, and then we'll wrap up. And there are books for sale, right? Okay, here, Francis.
Well, based on what you just said, and if anyone else is a friend of Jana's, you know how much she's there for everyone else, and how grateful I was as a friend to be able to be there for her. Like I think everyone else in this room, I'm sure, would say she's there for all of us. And on the book, about 2 points on that writing is an art, that you are that artist, and that came right through. And Rabbi Steve picked up on that. And I also wanted to point out and ask, because I remember it so vividly, and I was like, we're getting a drink at Bacar Lake right now, if you remember that. We're like, I'm taking her out. And then I came to Steve and I go, you heard, like, can you believe it was just beyond belief, the 1 in a million that was you. And it was, if you could speak, I guess I wanted to ask you about the overlapping of the Jewish holiday, that whole thing that was so bizarre that there was, I'll call it a conflict, actually, with the Jewish holiday, the timing of that, and this whole delay. And I can't say I totally understand that. And I don't, if it's opening a can of worms, that's fine, but I don't really understand that. There was that whole thing with it being directly with the timing of the Jewish holiday, which was us trying to understand that Jewishly. And Mazel Tov and much love to you and your family. And I know every time you must visit this, it must be really hard. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Francis. Okay, Tova.
So I'm halfway through with the book. It's really good. It's very enthralling, and I myself have a degree in writing and literature, so I'm not just, saying nothing. I feel like I'm on I know what I'm talking about. Just one question. You did not mention the player's name who hit the foul ball, and I feel like that was a very conscious decision. It's something that I can look up, anybody can look up, but I feel like that was kind of conscious in the beginning of the book anyway.
I can address that. So, according to my dad, the player is known. He thinks he knows who it is. But I have to say that the ESPN writer that helped me through this told me I needed to take that out because he took my dad's word for it and he published the name, and then he was asked to take it off because there was more information. There was some video. There was some, whatever it wasn't 100% who my dad thought it was. So as a reporter, he needed that to come out, and he needed to cover his butt, and he got in trouble for not vetting that 100%. So we think we know who it was.
Here's the story. We don't blame the player.
Yeah.
He was doing his job.
Yeah.
We blame Major League Baseball for letting the stadiums get to the position they're in now, condition, without netting in. They know where every ball's hit. They stay consistent statistics for everything. The reason what happened was I knew who the batter was because I was there and I was standing when he hit. And the Padres, when the name first came out, he was a younger player, and they said it was the next guy. So that's why
The Padres,
the San Diego Padres,
said that it was the next
they said it was the next batter, but it wasn't because I was standing up when the next batter was. They were already treating her when the next batter was up. But I don't want we don't want to blame the player. I mean, I have no gripe with the players. I think they just didn't want him to be emotionally involved. But I don't care who it was. It just happened. It could have been anybody.
It's really hard. Like, it took me 3 days to read the book because I keep putting it down. Not because it wasn't good, it was just reliving. And Jana was so good with reporters. A few called me, but I just couldn't do it. They called me at work, too, which I thought was really strange. But Jana was just the rock. And so I was like, go, do it. I'll do the rest, but I can't do that. My husband was home. I was at a concert. I came home, and I remember the game. He was watching the game, and it was tied. And I never miss a game, whether it's 10-1. He'll be like, let's go to bed. They're not going to win. I'm like, it's not over till the fat lady sings. He was so adamant, I'm going to bed. We went to bed, and my dad called, and I'm like, and my dad was so calm about it. And I hung up, and he goes, oh, just come tomorrow, because we don't know what's happening. And Steve said, we are not going to bed. We are getting your dad. We're going there now. Then I called my brother, and I knew my sister was out. But in all due respect, it's like my daughter's just mortified. How can you wear their T-shirt? Or I'll never go to Dodger Stadium again. I'll never spend a dime there. But it's not the players. Like my dad said, I love the sport. I love the game. It's the owners. They're greedy. This should have never happened. So what Jana has done it's amazing. I'm so proud.
Thank you, Lori. I think that's the perfect note for us to end on. Thank you all for coming tonight. Really, it's such a wonderful show of love. Sure. So welcome.